Well, welcome to the NAL at ED quarterly grantee meeting for April. Thanks for joining us over on Teams this week. Hopefully you were all able to join pretty easily. If any of you had any difficulty, let me know and we can help troubleshoot before our next meeting on Teams. But I want to kick off with our standard disclaimer. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number ED-ESE-15-A-0015/0006 with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. And a couple of housekeeping things as we're getting going, since many of us are new to Teams. If you look at the little toolbar that is over in the tiny window where you may be able to see some folks' faces, or in your larger Teams toolbar, it's got the same as Zoom. It's got the little camera if you want to turn on your face. It's got the little microphone if you want to be able to talk. We'd suggest that while the presentation is going on, if you go ahead and mute yourself, it really cuts down on that background noise, makes it easier for everybody to hear the presentation. And then if you want to share later, unmute during questions and things like that. And then at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Angela to introduce the YE team.
Good afternoon, everybody, or morning, if that's what it still is for you. Welcome and thank you for taking the time today to join us. I'm joined today, of course, with my colleague and your program officer for NAL at Ed, Tanya Tillis. Tanya, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well and hope your families are doing just well. Hopefully we'll have a good little conversation here today with you guys. And make sure that if you have any questions about anything, you can just speak up and ask, because I know sometimes we get in a rush, it seems, and then we forget to ask questions. So just write them down and be ready to ask anytime.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm going to turn it back over to you all, Sarah. Can't hear you.
I took my own advice and muted myself. So then we have our Synergy team on today. We have Kathleen with us, as well as Miranda and Sarah Whitehead joining from our team. And as Tanya was talking about, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to ask those, but you can also pop them over in the chat box. The chat box in Teams is called Conversations. So it still looks the same. It has a little chat bubble, but you'll notice it's called Conversations. That's your chat box. So you can pop any questions over there as well.
So today we're going to start with, I'll just revisit some of the COVID-19 information and share some new links that are up there now. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to walk you through some reminders related to grant administration, including expenditures. And I'll talk a little bit about NCEs. I'll turn it back over to Tanya for the APR and the next grant competition. Next slide. So we've shared this with you before. www.ed.gov/coronavirus, all one word, will take you to our main page for information and resources. And increasingly, those resources are turning into updates on critical policy guidance for you and other federal or Department of Ed grantees specifically. If you look, it's kind of small, I know this picture here, but if you look under additional resources for elementary and secondary schools, you'll see the first two bullets, and it will always be the latest information first. But the first two bullets are sharing information about the first being the information on the Governor's Emergency Education Relief funding, and that's support, again, under CARES, that will go to support education efforts across the states. And that's state-specific discretionary funding opportunities. So I invite you to take a look and see what might be happening with your leadership as these new opportunities passed under the CARES Act becomes available. We also have updated information across the Education Stabilization Fund. Again, these are different facets of the funding, the stimulus funding that is supporting education efforts that are coordinated through the U.S. Department of Education to states, primarily to the governors, as I mentioned in the first item. And there will be more opportunities coming up, but please take a look at those and be aware of what's happening just for your own particular local context. I'm sure that you will have colleagues and certainly partner agencies working on these opportunities. Next slide. Comparably, you'll see the additional resources for higher education institutions. And in that particular section, while it doesn't necessarily impact all of you directly, I think one thing to pay attention to, and for some of you, maybe more than others, are the opportunities that may be available to higher ed partners, meaning people that you partner with in other aspects and that you might want to consider looking back to leverage resources in a joint manner where maybe you haven't had or made the opportunity happen before. So just keeping you posted on those and what the impact might be in the areas around you. And then finally, you'll see additional resources in that next section of this same page. And the first item, which just popped up a couple of days ago, is donation or loan of personal protective equipment and other medical supplies and equipment purchased with federal funds. So in some cases, for instance, we've got districts and states and schools that are proposing to use items that were purchased with federal grant funds for another purpose, let's say career and tech education. And now they want to be able to donate some of that equipment for, of course, our high needs folks in the healthcare field. And so I think that that particular item, that fact sheet, will provide some guidance on what grantees have the flexibility to do to support that effort. The second item is specific to Perkins and the state plans, frequently asked questions, which they've continued to update. The third item is a little bit vague, but I do want to call it out, which is, it says questions and answers on the use of Department of Education grant funds during COVID-19 national emergency. That was one of our earlier guidance documents that is really around just some very isolated specific issues, and primarily they're pertaining to funds that might have been obligated for planned conferences, meetings, related travel that were part of the approved activities that grantees undertook as part of their grant funds or their grant project. So there is very specific questions and very specific guidance about the flexibility in terms of what can or can't be covered. So again, if you or colleagues in your particular entities have some relevant issues related to, again, canceled conferences, canceled travel, that type of thing, that particular item, questions and answers under additional resources, will provide you with some detailed guidance. Next, Sarah. And then finally, there are just some general resources, at-home activities that are shared by various federal agencies. and departments across the federal government, and then as well as general COVID pandemic awareness and guidance, CDC oriented, et cetera, much broader guidance. But again, please continue to keep looking there. I want to thank those of you that have sent questions to that COVID-19 email box. Please know that there is forthcoming guidance around, particularly around additional grant funds spending, allowability and flexibility. That is forthcoming. I promise it will be out soon. And so when that does, Sarah, I'll probably ping you guys to share an update with our grantees so that they're aware that that's been posted, to the extent that you, again, or your colleagues who are also grantees of other Department of Education awards may want to be sure to see as soon as possible. Thank you. And again, that's just the website again and the email address if you do have some burning questions that have not been answered by the guidance thus far. And Tanya, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, had to unmute myself as well. Okay, so our year-to-date expenditures, as you can see on the graph, that cohort 1 should be spending, well, we should be about 89% at this point. And so we still have a ways to go with some of you guys. And then Albuquerque, I think should be around 69%, I think. And with all the things happening now, I understand that, you know, things can't go as planned. But as soon as you can, as soon as you're able to, we need to really look at making sure that things are being spent as they should. Next slide.
All right.
Nocost extensions.
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit, Tanya. Yeah. With respect to the no-cost extensions, I know that we've had some early inquiries, and just a reminder, I'll say two things about this. One is that for any grantees that will be ending by September 30, our typical way of addressing no-cost extension requests are twofold. One is that you might remember during the APR guidance, we mentioned that if you're considering a no-cost extension, to provide detailed information about the need for a no-cost extension, the rationale, and what you would expect to be doing in that no-cost extension period. And to the extent that you know, for example, looking at that available balance today, if you're guesstimating what might be remaining at the end of the project, of this project period for you guys, for most of you who are ending, the question would be, how much of that remaining available balance would you need to use during that no cost extension period? We will, again, along with some other flexibility guidance, be sharing out reminders about no cost extensions, but we would expect to solicit no cost extension requests later in the year. The focus right now remains on what Tanya just talked about, which are large available balances and making sure that you're expending the funds to the extent possible. And so that brings me to now and where we are, and the reality of not maybe being able to spend at the rate for some obvious reasons. But also, if in fact it's you taking the time to think about where maybe 2 months ago you weren't thinking about a no cost extension, that now you might be thinking, well, we didn't get to finish activity A or B because we shortened the year early. And we think if we had 2 more months or 3 more months or 6 more months, however long you need, we think that if we had that additional few months, we could finish that activity that we didn't get to finish in the spring. That's certainly feasible. So that's the kind of stuff you'd want to talk about in your APR and reminding us sort of what you're considering for a no-cost extension period. That said, I just want to remind folks that the department's policy and the expectation is that you're not asking for a no-cost extension to exhaust the grant funds because they're there. It should be specifically to complete activities that you were not able to complete in that third and final year. So just want to give some context to that, meaning if you have $300,000 left, being realistic about what the expectation is about what you might be able to complete in an additional 6-month or even 12-month cost extension. And keep in mind, you know, we'd be looking to past performance, we'd be looking to the rate of activity happening to date, and we'd want to be realistic in terms of what we think could and would be able to get done in a no-cost extension period. I don't see us deviating so much from that policy so much as it is, again, where many of you, I would say, frankly, weren't expecting to ask for a no-cost extension, and now you might be reconsidering. Just, you know, you're going to have that option available to you, and we'll revisit this at a later time when we all know a little bit more about sort of where we stand. So we'll come back to this in the summer, but I just wanted to kind of throw this out there and remind folks to please talk about this, or what your thinking is anyway, preliminary thinking. It's nothing that has to be in stone, but writing that in your APR, that's very helpful to us. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So here, just a reminder timeline. So again, I mentioned we'll revisit this in the summer. It's something that we don't really address until much closer to the end of the project period. The process is simply that per Edgar, you are providing a written justification for why you need the no-cost time extension, providing enough detail so that we know that what you're asking to do is within the scope of the original approved application. The approval, generally speaking, it is the policy that grantees who request a first no-time cost extension get that extension, again, with the other caveats that I mentioned before. I do want to say, and thank you for calling this out, the OMB guidance. A lot of folks in sending us questions, for instance, many, I would say, tribes and tribal organizations have been sending the department reminders that, hey, OMB issued guidance to the federal government that there are all these flexibilities out there. So there are a lot of memos. Some of you may be more familiar than others with them, but basically OMB issued a series of memos providing guidance around flexibility. And I want to clarify that when OMB issued those memos regarding flexibility across the federal government, it is just that. It is guidance to all of the federal agencies. And when I say we're taking time, you obviously haven't seen some clear and detailed guidance around spending or extending due dates or deadlines, et cetera. And that's because we are working to interpret that guidance to determine how it will best support our grantees across the department. And so even though there are these OMB memos that provide and lay out all types of flexibilities, it is at the discretion of the department to adopt what exactly those flexibilities are. So again, that guidance from the department will be forthcoming. You'll see it on that coronavirus page we just talked about, and certainly we'll be sharing that with you. And if as needed, we can also just do what we're doing now, which is meet virtually and talk about it a little bit more if there are a lot of questions. But I think it should be pretty much straightforward. Teacher pay, I won't answer that now outside of saying yes, we will expect that if teacher pay is to be paying for the ongoing implementation of any aspects of your grant work, then yes. Curriculum development, right? Native language curriculum development or that related work, absolutely. Anything more, again, I would wait for that guidance to come out. And then finally, the final performance report and due dates, et cetera. That's not something we're going to visit now. We're going to wait and see what the guidance is that the department has adopted, and at which time we will share out with you as soon as we know it. Thanks. Tanya, I'm going to turn it back over to you, hon.
Okay. All right. So again, reminders, only the grant project director in G5 may submit the report. Some of you have folks that help you, maybe even people in the finance department, but if you're the project director, then you're the only one who can submit the report. G5 will not accept reports after 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 15th. Hopefully y'all have that written down, tattooed on your arm somewhere, or written in lipstick on your glass mirrors in your bathroom. So May 15th, 24 Eastern Standard Time. You'll not be able to submit anything after that time. So make sure that you understand that. Next slide. There again is that wonderful reminder. You may want to take a picture of it with your phone, even put it on your homepage. But just know that that's such a very important day and time. The NAL Ed grant competition. The notice of proposed priorities comment ended on March 30th, 2020. We had one comment submitted, and we are addressing that now. Currently, the NFP, the notice of final priorities, is being revised. We expect to have this and the NIA completed on time to run a competition and award funds in FY 2020.
Tanya, I'm going to say one thing about that real quick. It's fine. You can go to the discussion. Just a note, I know and I hope that some of you are considering, for those who do plan on ending their grants this year, I hope you're considering the prospect of applying for a new award in what we hope and expect, frankly, to still be an FY20 competition. We don't have any plans as of now to deviate from awarding by September 30. That said, if for some reason you are not planning to participate in this year's grant competition, or you know of other native language experts in your region, in your area, we are certainly looking for well-qualified peer reviewers to review those applications that do get submitted for consideration. We always need good peer reviewers with general and specialized understanding of education specific and unique to the needs of Native students. Native language expertise is certainly welcome. And I would just, in fact, add that, I would expect and anticipate that there could be folks that we're planning to have job opportunities that maybe have fallen through, which might make serving as a peer reviewer and getting paid for it a more incentivizing or motivating prospect. So again, if you know of educators or even, again, PhD students, other folks who might have availability during the summer and are willing to serve as peer reviewers, we are certainly looking for peer reviewers all the time. How do you do that? I will send a link to Sarah, that you can send out for us, and that will describe the qualifications that we look for. And essentially, we need a very complete resume, meaning dates, months, and years of start and end dates of positions for the last 10 years with complete contact information. And that resume or CV can be sent to Tanya, to me, or to indian.education@ed.gov. So again, if all else fails, you can forward it to Tanya or to me. or even to Sarah, maybe. I don't want to call Sarah out because I don't want to make you responsible for that. But if you do end up with them, she knows where to send it to us. But we welcome anybody that you think of that could serve well in that role in reviewing and evaluating and scoring applications for consideration. Okay.
Well, I'm going to unshare the PowerPoint because we're at the point for discussion and questions, and I think that's a little easier to do when we can see one another and we're not looking at a PowerPoint. So if you have any questions, you can either unmute and ask those right now, or if you're having any audio dilemmas, you're welcome to pop those over in that chat box.
And Sarah, for me, you just froze. Are other people saying the same thing with Sarah? Yeah. I'm sure she'll join us very quickly. And if you prefer, feel free to send your question through the chat box.
We can all still see each other. Wait, I thought I just saw her coming back in.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. This is Mike Hughes with the San Carlos Apache Tribe.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. I have a question for you regarding the APR. And I know the APR, in terms of the reporting we're looking at, is a deadline as of program activity on March 31st, I believe. One of the issues we're finding, not so much with the program, but with the financials, is that our partners cannot invoice us. Because of the COVID-19, all non-members have been prohibited from coming onto the reservation.
Yep.
Consequently, they can't get to their offices, and business services are not being conducted.
Yep.
This went into effect about 3.5 weeks ago. And as I said, it just has gotten carried, it's been extenuated because of some issues where non-tribal members came on. And unfortunately, now we have a number of tribal members who have been affected. And so we're basically really sheltered in place.
Yeah.
Given that, and I know that we will include that discussion because we have invoices from Arizona State University and from different partners. Given that, we will report drawdowns and financials as of March 31st. Would we be expected then to do an amendment on that APR at some point in time to provide clarification as to drawdowns? Thank you. Your guidance would be appreciated.
Sure. So I think as we had during our APR guidance webinar, in talking about that narrative section to talk about the budget, I think that's where you'd want to clarify that, yes, you know, Tanya should see a huge discrepancy between when she looks in G5 and might see a high balance and versus what you know to be, i.e. your own separate, you know, financial tracking, your own ledger that describes other costs that have not yet been reflected in drawing down. The expectation is that you would spell that out and say exactly what it is that's been spent. And that, you know, obviously the expectation is that when things do, people are in a position to be back in their offices and be able to process this stuff, that would happen. But, you know, again, I'll say this, if you're planning to end the grant project in September, just a reminder that even without talking about any kind of extra flexibility that you guys might end up getting as a result of revised guidance, independent of that, you have through the end of December to liquidate. So as long as the obligations have been made and you have an invoice or even an email to say, yep, we're going to be invoicing you, but we can't right now because X, even electronic documentation to evidence that will be really important. So just to evidence that the obligation has occurred prior to September 30. Again, banning that, I mean, you can also request the no-cost extension, knowing that there might be some real extenuating circumstances, to your point, Mike, and it's a good point, which is that folks might not even be around to be invoicing you right now, and that certainly would not surprise me for some places. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. We're running into a little bit of the same issue with some of the program data, the outcome data, in that once again, teachers cannot access the schools. They've been closed. They cannot come on to the reservation. They just can't get there. They can't get to their data. Their internet is down. And so we're having a little bit of a glitch with that. We can describe the programs. We can look at the participation levels and all that. I'm concerned. I will need to see what we can do in terms of the outcomes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the only other thing I'll say about, the reality for many of you where some of the information may not be complete, we will understand that. What I think will make this very, very important is going back to Tanya's imploring you to submit the APR on time. The sooner we have that, the sooner we can be responsive and find ways to address the situation. If we get no APR for a month or 2 months or 3 months, that makes it a lot more difficult to make an assessment without any information. So just another plea to compound Tanya's request for timely data. And look, there's the other reality of if there's something really critical going on and health for each of you is of the utmost priority for us, and you cannot do it for any host of reasons that would be justifiable, please let Tanya know. Just send her an email, and if you have a chance to talk to her, fine. And if you don't, just be really clear about your ability to not do it if in fact things have changed and you find that it's not going to be possible to be on time. That's helpful to us as well. No communication is not helpful.
And for those who might not be able to see the chat box, we did have a question about how recent the numbers were on the bar graph slide for G5. Those are actually from yesterday.
That's
so
right.
They're as of early afternoon yesterday. I know many of you don't have just immediate access in G5 to your individual drawdowns, but if you go into your program planners, I've updated all of your drawdown tabs. So all of the individual drawdowns that go together to make that are actually right there in your planner. So you can access that and have all that information as of yesterday afternoon. And Susan, were you asking for the bar graph again? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can pull that up. Yeah, and there's that bar graph for anybody who was wanting to see that again. And the percentage that's at the top of each bar is what percentage you've expended. So like Susan, for example, y'all have expended 83% of your funds. So you're basically on target with the anticipated rate of drawdown. And then that orange part would be the other. So for example, for UConn for Susan, that would be your 17% that's remaining. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take this slide down, but if any of you want a copy of that slide, just let me know and I can always get that for you. All right, any other questions today? All right. Well, if you think of any questions, we'll stay on for a few minutes, so feel free to stay on and ask any questions aloud or in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll let you get back to your Thursday. It looks like, at least for those who have their cameras on, some sunny weather. Might not be warm weather, but it might be sunny weather today. So have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everybody. And I really hope everybody stays safe and well. Thank you.